Actually, I did do something in my life that is worth more than any amount of money. There is a saying that to save a man's life is to save the whole world. That's what I did. I saved a man's life. We were in the South China Sea during a yacht race from Hong Kong to the Philippines when a monsoon descended on us. It was early evening and the visibility was poor, with a torrential downpour of rain. We were racing, and the skipper of our two-mast boat, the Ketch, was determined to achieve the maximum boat speed under conditions which were extreme. 15-foot waves were crashing over the side of the 63-foot boat, and we were ordered to keep the heavy No. 1 Genoa, a type of jib sail, up to power the boat. The boat was the biggest sailboat I'd crewed on, but in the middle of the monsoon it seemed like it was too small to be safe. The waves crashed down on it, and eventually the Genoa was torn into 3 big strips, which were dragged alongside the boat and slowing us down. 2 crew members rushed toward the foredeck of the boat to try to pull the torn sail up and over onto the deck. One of my crewmates made it to the bow, and the other lost his footing while trying to step between the spinnaker pole and the edge of the boat. Just as he'd lost his footing, a wave swept him overboard. Meanwhile, our only female crew member was struggling to take down the mizzen sail at the rear of the boat, and she spotted the white foul weather gear of the Dutch lawyer who was trying to keep his head above water with no life jacket, as the macho thing was not to wear one, as it got in the way of maneuvering to do your tasks. The crew member on the mizzen deck yelled, "Man overboard!" and threw a man overboard kit, a large donut-shaped life preserver with a strobe light and radio beacon, in the direction of the Dutchman. The swells were so high that he never got within reach of the kit. Instead, he saw our boat going away from him at about 14 knots and began to think the worst, i.e. that the boat was going to leave him behind and there were no other boats within miles of him, only a British warship about 20 miles away. The Dutchman needed to be rescued right away or he would drown. I was just coming on to my 4-hour watch, and I made my way up from the interior of the boat up into the cockpit. I had quite a bit of sailing experience, but not out in the ocean in a storm like this one. The helmsman ordered me to make my way to the middle of the boat to help bring in the torn sail. I was cautious and immediately clipped on my safety harness to a line that ran along the starboard side of the boat where the Dutchman went overboard. The man on the bow and I lay on our backs and somehow brought the sail remnants onto the deck. I felt really proud to have done this, as I was normally in the cockpit, not up forward of the mast of the boat. Just as I was back in the cockpit about to clip in, the helmsman, who was an Englishman, covering the race for the London Observer, was steering the boat and said to me, "There's a man overboard and we need to prepare for attack. Just follow my instructions." When the full crew of 12 was on deck, there were many specialized tasks for each crew member to perform in order to successfully tack and allow the mainsail to cross from one side of the boat to the other. My job was to trim sails, not to winch on the 2-man winch to bring the mainsail under control. This was the job of a couple of gorillas, big brute guys, not a slim lightweight like myself. Unfortunately, those big men were down below sleeping. The English sailor on the bow got into an argument with the helmsman and yelled that we should drop the mainsail and go back under power and rescue the Dutchman. We'd practiced man-overboard drills around the islands which comprise Hong Kong. There are over 400, and the helmsman was in charge and stuck to the drill we'd practiced. He looked at the 2 compasses on each side of the wheel, looked at his watch and the amount of time that transpired since the Dutchman went overboard, and started to tack the boat. I followed the helmsman's instructions on which lines to move, and the boom of the mainsail swung around and across the boat to the opposite side. I began to winch like crazy to take up the slack and get the control of the mainsail. I can't explain my success in any way but to say that my body was surging with adrenaline and super strength. The triangular tack was successful and brought us to within close proximity to the Dutchman. The helmsman and I could see the strobe light of the man overboard kit, and that helped us to spot the Dutchman. On the way toward him, I reached out and grabbed the man overboard kit to bring it on deck. A couple of gorillas were now in the cockpit with me. They went to the mizzen deck and threw a line to the Dutchman. They pulled him in like a big fish and lifted him up onto the boat. As he slid down the teak deck toward me on his stomach, I could see the terror in his eyes. I brought him down below and covered him with a blanket as he was in shock. Afterwards, I made a suggestion that we break out the life jackets, and even the seriously macho New Zealander and Aussies put on life jackets. No one said a word for about 2 hours, and then the Dutchman came up from below into the cockpit. He told us that he had prepared to die when he saw the boat going away from him so fast. The helmsman, who had a sense of humor, thought about the movie Splash and nicknamed the Dutchman Splash, as he had actually tripped and fallen overboard while we had been moored in the Hong Kong harbor. We all had a good laugh, including Splash. When I recall this anecdote, I do feel as though I did something really worthwhile and under extreme pressure. So if I take the rational view of my life, this memorable feat compensates for many of my worst moments and shortcomings. If I focus on the fact that I was instrumental in saving a man's life, I feel good about myself. I did have my few minutes of heroism, and those few minutes were probably the most important in my life. The helmsman wrote the story for the London Observer, and I and the female crew member were the heroes of the miraculous yacht rescue.